Hi, my name is Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogy, and Apogy is a change management training, coaching, and consulting firm. And this is our Change Leader Speaker Series. So every other week, every other month, I'm posting interviews and conversations with change leaders, change management experts, people in the industry, consultants, academics, anyone who has an experience with leading or has experience with leading, implementing, influencing, guiding organizational change. And today I have with me Patrick McNulty. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Jessica, how's it going?
Going great. And I'll let him introduce himself, but I met Patrick through an industry association that we're both connected to. And he was at his previous employer. I knew someone at his previous employer. We've just got this 6 degrees of separation, which has been kind of cool. But I wanted him to come on and just share a little bit about his story, because he has been in change management for some time, and now he's kind of just his whole career progression is very interesting, and I got some fun conversations for you, Patrick. But if you don't mind introducing yourself, where you currently work, and then I have some questions that'll get us started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my whole career, is networking. I think it's change professionals, right? That's how we meet people, grow our network, and we're always trying to figure out ways to help people. But now I'm currently a senior consultant at Deloitte in their human capital organizational transformation service area, kind of focusing on digital and cloud enablement projects. And kind of my career progression. I was lucky or fortunate to graduate in the '90s before Y2K came, right? And then back then though it was you had information systems degrees, but you went to a computer lab. So
right.
I feel like I've benefited by growing up with technology, and helping organizations use technology. And it started in a training capacity, right out of, I think at college, I took some C++ classes and realized I didn't want to be a coder, but I knew technology was, going to be the ticket. So I specialized in performance improving technologies, which was, kind of a specialty degree that really focused on how organizations and companies were going to use technology. And I think, back then, defaultly everybody went to training,
Right.
and so, it was like, okay, develop training, so right out of school, I did a lot of, large ERP, CRM implementations, from a training aspect, then had an opportunity to open up a corporate university for a large service provider, and realize, through the training, you got to, people could pass the test, people like the training courses, but true training evaluation got to behavior and ROI, and then those results began to taper off. It's like,
right,
okay,
right.
people like the training, they like the class, they like the free lunch, right? They could pass the test, but then if you ever went and audited the class and you went back out in the field, they necessarily, the behaviors hadn't changed,
right?
And at that point, that's when I got introduced into John Cotter and kind of leading change, and talked about kind of the a different way to think about training, but actually from the change management with the benefit realization aspect of it.
Right.
And so kind of for the last 10, 15 years in different capacities, whether through consulting, whether internal, corporate, in startup organizations, helping small organizations adopt technology. I've kind of seen the gamut, gotten the certifications along the ways, the scars to prove it. And, now just continually to help organizations and leaders really get the benefit out of their investments they're making in their people.
Right. Absolutely.
To improve their lives and make their organizations more productive. A lot of times through technology, change management is not always about technology, but a lot of the experience I have, is introducing technology into organizations.
Well, and so much of business is driven by technology today. I don't think we're going to get away from it. I mean, it's an enabler of strategy. So I think there's some aspect to it. Now, of course, there are different changes that occur within a workplace, structure changes, process changes, people changes. But even then, the kind of the core is that behavior, the benefits realization for whatever the investment in the change, is. So yeah, I think technology will always kind of be a part of the conversation. That's interesting though. So you started in training, and then, thinking about, you were introduced to change management and John Cotter and his model and methods, and then it sort of really helps you think about how you approach what you're doing differently. So what do you think, today with all of your experience and just taking a step back and looking at the practice of change management? And actually, before we hopped on this call or before we started, I hit record, you and I were talking about this idea of leadership and how that's something that is a really important component of change management. But where do you see that intersection? Or tell me a little bit more about the role of the leader versus the role of the manager, and where does change management kind of fit in that picture for you?
Yeah, well, I'll steal from Cotter a little bit, or paraphrase, how he defines, managers and leaders. And, I think managers are your planners and schedulers, right? And so they're the ones, when you think, project management, this is a start date, this is the end date, this is the budget we have, we're going to stay within these boundaries, right? And so you have good managers. But leaders, leaders are your motivators and your inspirers, right? I mean, leaders are your visionaries. That's where a lot of change management methodologies, start with a vision, because that's so key. And so I think in a lot of organizations, right, we grow up and you can be a good manager, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're a good leader.
Right.
And so there's a lot of self-awareness that I think you see in organizations, that reach out to change management or change leadership help. It's like, all right, I'm a good manager, and that's super beneficial to organizations, right? Because that means you can plan things, you can schedule things, but when it comes to motivating people, that's a skill set that maybe necessarily you don't have. So right. It's kind of helping them grow that muscle and really become a leader. And I think that's where you're seeing change management truly at an impactful level in organizations is at that leadership level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's only so much that you can do with process and tools and structure. That really does come down to the people that are leading and guiding the process, that are, interacting with the other humans that are being asked to do something differently. So I totally agree with that. And I do think that, I love your perspective on this. I think the way that change management is typically thought of, at least by people who are maybe not trained in change management or have some training, but they hone in on, it's communications, it's training, it's these things, when it really does come, it's so much more than that. It's the engagement piece, it's the leadership piece. And I don't know if that's, we need to spend, I think, as change leaders, emphasizing what we're talking about here and its importance in our practice, maybe more so than we do now. Now, I've been actually following Deloitte for quite some time. Jen Fisher is somebody who I follow on LinkedIn, and I love how she has incorporated, she's your chief wellbeing officer, I believe.
Correct.
How do you see that kind of permeate the concept of wellbeing and change management and leadership? I mean, how has that come up in your current role, or how do you think about the connections there?
Yeah, well, absolutely, right. I mean, because change management, the end user experience, right? And so I think it's that servant leadership, that empathetic thinking, that empathetic leadership, that is so key. And so it is part of Deloitte's culture, and so I think that helps us in our client engagement too, because it's you got to not just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, right? And so we have a really strong culture here in terms of end user engagement. When we go through big changes, like a lot of return to workforce, we're a large organization too that is going through a lot of changes, but being held, it's being handled in ways that we help clients and other organizations that are going through the change. So having that empathetic approach, obviously will make any change initiative more successful, right? I mean, because that's if a lot of change management is defined in so many different ways, right? And there's so many different ways to look at it. And one way that you hear a lot though is what is the dependency of your ROI on human interaction, right? So if there's a human component to your change, that percentage is going to be positively impacted by change management. And people. When you talk about leaders, how to motivate people, it's you have to invest in their success. I think that's really what is interesting about change management is as a profession, it allows us to allow organizations to invest in the success of their people and their employees, because when you're investing in someone else's success, they'll want to adopt that change, right? I mean, because at that point, you've hooked them, right? I mean, because they're recognizing that this change, this tool, this technology is for their benefit. And so you can really drive that home. So yeah, I mean, I think you're, having that look and having that approach to employee well-being, is so critical, because a lot of the technology that we're utilizing now is for well-being, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
about, in the, taking this call, from the basement of my house,
Right.
now with, multiple screens, wireless, computer, laptop, I mean, whatnot. And so, I've become accustomed, and others have become accustomed, to a new way of working. And,
Right. It's that
it's,
flexibility piece that
yeah,
we didn't have before. That's enabling technologies, enabling that flexibility that supports your well-being, and is, people who are leading and implementing change, recognizing people need that. It could even inform, I think, just kind of hearing as you were describing that, inform how we modify our approach as change management professionals, as change leaders, thinking about the way in which we deliver the information, the training, the engagement, recognizing that it may need to be more flexible than here's when you're getting here's when you're getting the information, and having this really systematic approach, which I think there's obviously room and value for that, but accounting for people's different needs in a different way is really, I think, where our practice is headed. What about some practical, so as we think about this focus on leadership, the integration of well-being, and how that's a big component of this too, but coming back to this idea of, okay, I'm a change leader. And I'll give you an example. So when I'm working with clients or coaching clients, and I talk about what it means to be an effective change leader, I will talk about the skills that they can leverage to be a better leader, period. And then how do they infuse that into their strategies and plans? So I'll talk about like active listening and using their coaching skills to have conversations to get a different outcome. We talk about resilience, developing resilience versus managing resistance. Like, we've got tools they can use, self-reflection tools. And at first they're like, it feels a little woo, but a part of it though, in becoming, I think about the most effective leaders are people who are empathetic, like to your point, they use empathy, compassion, and they use, they take a coaching versus managing approach. And so when they are working with their teams to implement a change or lead and guide the change, they're leveraging some of those soft skills that are really important, especially during technology, transformations. How would you, or like what recommendations can you give to people who are, let's say, they're assigned to a project to implement a CRM or an ERP? How would they infuse some of that leadership? How would they elevate the leadership role and capacity, competencies of the people that they're affecting? Do you have any suggestions there that could be helpful for people who are in our shoes, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're partnering with, a sponsor or a leader of change, a leader of an ERP or CRM system, you have to, make sure that they define what those goals and success criteria are. But what also then is like, again, how are you going to start motivating your employees? What's in it for me? How are we, and it's not necessarily control the spin, but you control the narrative, right?
Right.
I mean, right from the get, how do you control the narrative, and how are you, by controlling that narrative, making sure that you're bringing your employees along on that journey.
Right.
And so I would, three key components of, motivation, one component being autonomy.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm a big proponent of agile, and I think you see more organizations going to agile, and we can have a whole nother conversation about big A, little a. So this is not an agile conversation, but the agile methodology, or the part of the method, is getting that end user involved as quick as possible.
Absolutely.
Right, and getting that end user involved. So any leader, the first thing you have to do is like, go out and get someone from the field and get them on part of the team. Make sure that you have someone that actually is doing the work, is well represented on the team. And, making sure that, they are not losing that autonomy, that they are part of the solution, that they agree with the problem, and, and that they're also part of this solution. So any leader, I would make sure that, your employees or your impacted workers don't feel that they've lost any autonomy. And again,
Absolutely.
that's include getting them involved as quick as possible. Other two components, mastery and purpose. Mastery is important. That's your goal, right? I mean, how are you going to know what winning is? So defining those goals. That's why that vision is so important. And that's really pushing leaders, because that's, we're, as change professionals, that's, what we need to make sure. That's the difference between a manager and a leader, right?
Yeah.
I mean, managers, they'll struggle coming up with mastery components, like how are we going to hold people accountable? Where leaders will be natural to draw into, like, okay, what is winning? How are we going to win? And how am I going to motivate my people?
Yeah.
And the last one, purpose. I think we've become more of a purpose-driven, hopefully, society, right? So we want to make sure that people are aligned to the purpose. And, I think a lot of new studies, behavioral scientists will tell you, not just what's in it for me, though, but what's in it for my team and what's in it for my community.
Yes.
So there's different leverages that you can pull on in those three components. But, as a leader, if you're making sure that your team has autonomy, you're setting mastery goals, and you're aligned to a purpose, you're at a pretty good head start, right? I mean, because that's going to drive your communication plan. It's going to drive your training plan. So, communication and training, I think, are an output, are the management aspect of change leadership.
Yeah.
Change leadership is actually the beginning of that, is establishing those boundaries of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and driving those home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about it, the kind of the way I frame it is empowering people to power change. And it summarizes what you've just said. So I love that, how you framed it. And I part of this too is having the conversation that you and I just had with the sponsors and leaders in the organization, because they may be well-versed in leading and managing teams, but when there's a change that happens, having that conversation about purpose, about mastery, that's important. It's just, and I think, just to demystify how coaching leaders and sponsors, it really just does come down to how are you, what kind of conversations are you having with them to raise their level of awareness so they can show up in a different way. They can show up and be the most effective version of themselves. And it's probably going to, feel a lot better too, coming from that, leading from that place versus something else. So your roots are in computer sciences. Is sort of right?
Loosely, right.
You told, what was you specialized? What did you specialize in again? It was
performance improving technologies.
That's right. Okay. I'm like, I haven't heard that before. So that's pretty cool. So performance improving technologies, then in training, then change management. And now we're in this place where change management and this conversation around change leadership, and the focus on being an effective leader and what that means is really a core part of our role and responsibilities as people who are focused on this aspect of what it means within, organizational change and workplace change. Where do you think the future of our practice is headed? Like, what's kind of on the horizon that maybe we're not, we're starting to see the edges of it, but we haven't really dove into it more fully? And where do you see how we do what we do going?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, we'll kind of piggyback in with, the agile approach, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that you'll see, more and more organizations, when you think about, again, 2000, Y2K came and went, people weren't really using, technology, computers or cell phones, right? I mean, we're still on dial up, just in 20 years, the conversation's gone from like, hey, can we do web-based training, right? Or can we do computer-based training, to the like, hey, why is this not on my cell phone? So I think the user expectations. So mm-hmm. I think we're going with, and where leadership is going with a lot of, the collaboration tools that people are using is, more transparency,
right.
And so what more transparency is going to do, it's going to start flattening organizations. And, mm-hmm. and not to steal something from Cotter again, but his most recent book, Accelerate, talks about, and having, I think a unique perspective of being consulting, corporate, and startup company, having all those levels of experience, I definitely see large corporations benefiting from trying to move to that startup mentality. Mm-hmm. where everybody knows everything, right? To a level of appropriateness. But there is where anybody can solve any problem, where mm-hmm. anybody can be part of any team, where anybody can speak up, and so I think that to truly drive benefit realization of all the technologies that are available to people, right? It's that level of transparency. It's a level of bureaucracy, that the technology is going to remove from organizations. So I think we're going to continue to see organizations move faster, move more nimbly. And to do that, they're going to have to bring their employees along on the journey. So the quicker that large organizations, get their field workers, and again, not to tout agile too, because people do agile right and wrong, just like they do waterfall right and wrong. So agile is the silver bullet solution. But the sooner you can get end users involved, in developing solutions to solve their problems, then you're not worried about adoption. No one has ever questioned adoption when you've solved a problem that they've had, right? And when they've asked you like, hey, I need to do this to make my job easier, then you're not having adoption questions. Then it's like, how can we do this faster? How can we do this more quickly? So I think you're naturally seeing, organization. The whole technology barrier is almost gone now, right? And so it's changing how we do communication. It's training how we do training. Where software development should be intuitive enough, but we're not taking people out of their day-to-day job to do instructor-led training, right?
Absolutely.
Not even web-based training. We're talking about real-time, just-in-time training that you can put into softwares. And again, when you're developing features, like everybody wants to be Amazon and Facebook, but that's neither here nor there. But when you develop, they don't spend a lot of money, on end user development, right? Because they're developing features that have been vetted and that people want. So it's just simple pop up, like here's a new button, click this button, it'll do everything you want. Yeah. So I think that's where we're going to naturally see change management, tools and in the practice move to more real time. And it's going to have to, because the change is going to be so rapid that it's all going to move to real time. So
what sort of skill set then do you think that change leaders should start to look at, adding to their toolkit? Are there skills that, if you think about change management training and certification today, or even like project management certification, like what's missing from our toolkit that would be supportive of what you're describing? Because you summarize that so well. And I where do we go from here in terms of how do we upskill and reskill ourselves to be effective in that brave new world that you just described?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, right, is change isn't just happening at the frontline employee, right? Change is happening at that management level, right? And so these managers, and these leaders, to your point, is decision-making skills, right? You need to be much faster and you need to be much more self-aware or much more, realistic in like, well, I can make a bad decision. You think about the old school, waterfall, 3-year SAP implementations or ERP implementations, that was one decision you made that, 3 years later, you were going to like, oh my gosh, it was either the right decision or wrong decision, right? Careers are made or lost on those.
Yeah.
Where, now with a 6-week sprint, you can be like, hey, we're going to introduce this, you can make an error, make a mistake in human judgment, but then, recover from that because you're going to pivot quickly, so I think, leadership skills that people need to, and organizations need to, is decision making and the ability to react to bad decisions. And not bad decisions, just the wrong. Again, we're making so many decisions, right? Being able to pivot, and live with that, because I think as a society, we have that scoreboard mentality, right? And so we're so terrified to make a bad decision. We delay those decisions, and that's one of the luxuries of waterfall. A lot of those decisions to continue to be delayed, right? Because you wait so long for that implementation, you can just delay. I think one of the things that Agile is doing is making organizations make those decisions faster and make those decisions quicker, and then be able to react to them based on real-time data and real-time decisions. So, what you're potentially losing in large organizations, again, is status quo. Well, what has always worked? It's always worked. Like, hey, it's the end of the quarter. We got our reports. All right. By the end of, but in the quarter 3, we'll be telling you what we're going to do to react to quarter 2. It's like, all right, let's end quarter 2, and then on Tuesday of quarter 3, we'll give you that information, right? So it's a level of accountability, you're going to see, and it's, I think that's, a key component that, again, let's focus on developing leaders and people that can make decisions quickly and, react to those decisions based on real-time data.
That's very, very insightful. Developing change leaders at all levels in the organization, so to speak. And it makes me think too, that the way that change management professionals work with leaders, sponsors, that hierarchy that's going to be kind of blown up. So how do you find those leaders who can be influential in the process and make quick decisions? Wow, that was a lot of good information. I'm going to go, I haven't read Accelerate by John Kotter, so I'm going to actually go get that book too. That was a good recommendation there. Anything else that you would love to impart on people who are thinking about getting into change management, joining an organization, focusing on the change aspects of tech implementation, or I've seen more, change management being closely aligned with talent development. Any kind of food for thought for people who are interested in getting into this profession or who have been in it for some time and are thinking about, kind of what's next? Words of wisdom from Patrick.
Yeah, words of wisdom from Patrick. I just say get involved. And so that's the way me and Jessica met is through our local ACMP chapter. So if you are interested in helping people or interested in change, find a way to get involved. There's a lot of professional organizations. There's a lot of big ways to get involved in the community and read. And then I would say one of the cool things about change management is you're helping people. And I think that there's some science behind it, but there's a lot of art too. And so each change is different. But expand your horizon. Just don't read your change management books. Don't just read Kotter and ProSci. They're all great. I endorse all of those. But then also read some behavioral scientists. Daniel Pink I'd recommend him. Drive. Dan Reilly, Predictably Irrational. Again, because it talks about how humans react and how there actually is science behind the ways that you can motivate people and that you can actually change people. So and that by just attending associations and professional events. So just stay connected, continuously learn and understand there's a lot of science behind what it takes to motivate people to change. And there's actually a right way and wrong way to do it. And if you've lived through the wrong way to do it, and we probably all have, right? Because we've all an organization that didn't adopt change. But then you read these you read some of these professional writings and join some of these organizations, and you recognize it's like, all right, there's actually a framework that will work. And so if you live through bad change, that you can definitely live through good change, or you can be a part of the good change.
Absolutely. I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking, even if you're not planning to get into a role in change management, everything you've described, having this knowledge base will make you a more effective leader, regardless. And so that's really kind of what organizations need, is more leaders, versus managers.
Change management, change leader, it's a life skill, right? Yes. Anything you want to do in life and anything, easily achieved isn't highly esteemed, right? So if it was easy, everybody would do it. So if you want to do something different, if you want to do something that someone else hasn't done, or an organization hasn't done, you can put a plan in place to achieve those goals.
Absolutely.
It's not just going to happen overnight.
No, that's true. That is very true. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. This was a great conversation. I'm so glad that we had a chance to connect. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights with Apogy's community, with my community. Look forward to putting this out there and people can watch the video. And so thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. You too, Jessica. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.